Prince William has, in effect, staged a quiet coup inside Buckingham Palace. His opening move was the systematic removal of Queen Camilla from the operational core of the royal institution, conducted piece by piece after a secret luxury yacht scandal erupted in the summer of 2025. The most striking element is not the yacht itself. It is the manner in which the entire episode unraveled. There was no dramatic investigation, no high-profile whistleblower. The chain of events began with a routine ship registry update, a dry maritime filing prepared solely for insurance purposes, the sort of document examined only by those whose professional duty requires it. That single administrative record initiated a sequence of revelations that continues to reshape the British monarchy. The official explanations offered in the months that followed have proven increasingly fragile under closer examination. The journey in question took place in late July 2025, while Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, fulfilled a series of public engagements, among them a visit to a children's hospice in Birmingham and a veterans event near Edinburgh. Queen Camilla was aboard a private super yacht anchored off the southern coast of France. The vessel was not a royal craft. It had not been chartered through official channels, nor did it appear in the court circular. Registered in Malta under the name Esperanza 3 and owned through a Luxembourg holding company, the yacht belonged to a Swiss-based financier whose name featured nowhere in Camilla's public schedule or in any palace communication that summer. No formal announcement was issued. Royal correspondents received no briefing. The palace press office, which ordinarily records the movements of senior working members of the family, held no record of the voyage. In an institution defined by meticulous documentation, such a complete absence constitutes a deliberate decision rather than an administrative oversight. The owner of the Esperanza 3 has never been convicted of any offense, and no formal charges have been brought against him. Over the preceding decade, however, his name has appeared in multiple European lobbying disclosures. His commercial interests extend to land development, agricultural policy, and heritage property law, areas that sit uncomfortably close to the spheres in which royal patronages and crown estate decisions can exert quiet influence. He belongs to precisely the category of individual from whom the royal family sought distance after the difficulties surrounding Prince Andrew. Subsequent reporting established that Camilla had accepted hospitality on the same vessel on an earlier occasion. That earlier visit transforms an isolated episode into a pattern. The July 2025 voyage lasted 5 days. Among those present were a political donor with active property applications in the West Country, a European media executive whose company held broadcasting contracts linked to businesses receiving royal endorsements, and at least 2 individuals whose names had surfaced in leaked documents from a 2023 Brussels lobbying inquiry. None attended in an official capacity. None appeared on any public record. The gathering consisted of individuals whose commercial interests intersected with the institution Camilla represented. Every guest on the yacht sought something the Crown, in one form or another, can affect: planning decisions, broadcasting arrangements, heritage determinations. This was not a private reunion of long-standing acquaintances. It was a concentrated period of unrecorded proximity between the Queen Consort and parties with business before the institutions she formally supports. Even if no improper conversation occurred, the visual and symbolic record alone carries substantial risk. In the modern monarchy, appearance itself constitutes substance. Once access to the crown appears available through private hospitality on a privately owned yacht, institutional damage is already present, irrespective of whether any favor was exchanged. Prince William understands this principle with particular clarity. The subsequent exposure of the voyage did not originate in investigative journalism. It began with the routine maritime filing that recorded the vessel's presence at a specific marina on a specific date. A researcher cross-referenced that filing with a photograph posted briefly by one of the guests on a private social media account. The image showed a dinner on deck. The post was deleted shortly after publication, yet a copy had already been preserved. Within 48 hours, the image reached 2 British journalists and a German outlet long engaged in mapping European lobbying networks. By the first week of August, the basic facts were under quiet verification. By mid-August, the palace press office faced inquiries for which it was unprepared. The entire sequence rested on 2 slender threads: one deleted photograph and one administrative document rarely examined outside professional circles. The damage proved uniquely severe because of its timing. For the previous 18 months, Prince William had advanced a clear internal program of tighter controls on external relationships maintained by senior royals, stricter rules governing gifts and hospitality from parties charities with financial interests linked to the crown, and an explicit determination that the institution could not absorb another access-related controversy of the kind associated with Prince Andrew. Those rules had been formalized in writing and circulated to the households of every senior royal. Compliance was mandatory. Camilla's office received the document. She proceeded with the voyage regardless. Sources speaking to the Times in August described the atmosphere inside Kensington Palace as one of controlled fury. That description carries particular weight for those familiar with William's methods. He does not raise his voice, he does not brief the press, he does not offer public explanations. His consistent practice is the measured removal of individuals from positions of influence. He has already demonstrated this approach with his brother, with Camilla's sister Annabel Elliot, and with Prince Andrew's occupancy of Royal Lodge. When William concludes that a matter is closed, the formal announcement, if it arrives at all, merely records a decision reached earlier. By late August, the question circulating within palace circles was not whether he would act, but how swiftly and by what means. William did not learn of the voyage from published reports. He received the information before journalists began their first inquiries. Someone within the limited circle aware of the trip, whether a guest, a member of staff, or a person connected to the owner, ensured the details reached Kensington Palace directly. In this environment, such an action constitutes more than a leak. It is a deliberate warning. At least one individual judged the circumstances sufficiently serious to place the information in the hands of the future king. That source indicates that William possessed an informant inside the relevant network, and that the scandal never arrived as a surprise. The decision to inform him also reveals a quieter institutional realignment. Individuals close enough to observe events had already begun to calculate that William represented the more secure center of gravity. The tip-off itself became evidence that internal loyalties were shifting before any formal reassignment of engagements occurred. Staff sensed the change before Camilla herself registered its full extent. The Esperanza 3 is registered in Malta and owned through a Luxembourg holding company, Verlaine Capital Partners. Such structures are common among luxury vessels, yet they render financial transparency difficult. The central unanswered question remains: who met the cost of Camilla's presence on board? Senior royals are required to declare private travel or hospitality exceeding defined thresholds through internal channels that feed into annual transparency records. The July voyage appears in none of those records. One director of the holding company is a British citizen named in a 2022 Parliamentary Committee report examining foreign influence in United Kingdom property markets. The report stopped short of alleging criminality, but recommended closer scrutiny of the firm's lobbying activities around heritage land decisions. Those decisions fall squarely within the sphere of influence associated with the King's Foundation, an organization with which Camilla is publicly connected. When questions arose, the initial response from Camilla's household characterized the travel as a private matter. That formulation is sustainable only when the journey is financed by the royal concerned and carries no external commercial links. It collapses when the host maintains financial relationships with royal charities. William's office rejected the characterization within days. The demand for a full account of the financing was conveyed without diplomatic softening. At the time of reporting, that account had not been supplied. Further complication followed. 3 separate palace sources confirmed to 2 publications that Camilla had accepted hospitality from the same owner during a long weekend in the summer of 2023. That earlier visit was likewise omitted from transparency records. A senior official had noted it at the time. A quiet conversation occurred, no formal record was created, and the matter was set aside. William was unaware of the 2023 episode until the later investigation. The discovery altered the character of the case from isolated misjudgment to established pattern. William's team examined the charity accounts with particular care. A donation of £40,000 from Verlaine Capital Partners was cross-referenced against the dates of both voyages and against a 2024 planning application submitted by a related company for a heritage site in Somerset. The application was ultimately rejected, yet it had been considered by a body that included advisors appointed through royal channels. No allegation is made that Camilla intervened. The appearance of sustained proximity between a senior royal and a commercial interest seeking decisions from bodies linked to her network is precisely the risk the palace's revised rules were designed to eliminate. By late August, the matter had ceased to be a story about a yacht and had become a question of institutional governance. The meeting that crystallized the response took place on a Tuesday in the first week of September 2025 at Kensington Palace, rather than Buckingham Buckingham Palace. 3 senior advisors attended: William's private secretary, his communications secretary, and 1 official from the king's household who had been ordered to be present. William brought a physical folder containing printed documents, the charity statements, the port logs, the 2022 lobbying disclosures, and a summary of the 2023 visit. He placed the folder on the table without opening it and asked who had seen the earlier material, and decided it required no further transmission. The choice of a physical file in an institution accustomed to unrecorded understandings carried deliberate weight. The official from the king's household could not provide a clear answer. He acknowledged that the earlier voyage had been noted but could not identify who had determined that it should remain off the record. William then set out the sequence in chronological order and asked a single question: at what point had his father been informed? The reply proved unsatisfactory. Charles had been told of the July journey only in the most general terms, as a husband might learn of his wife's holiday plans. He had not been informed of the owner's identity, the Luxembourg structure, the lobbying history, or the donation. William observed that the king remained uninformed because the system itself had failed to protect the relevant interests. He then issued 3 requirements: a full written disclosure of both voyages to the king's principal private secretary within 7 days, a comprehensive review of Camilla's patronages for external donor links, and the immediate suspension of all contact between Camilla's household and the yacht's owner. Camilla resisted the third demand through Charles. The king telephoned William the following day, arguing that Camilla had never intended deception and that a formal review risked wider exposure. William replied that the facts were already circulating and that the palace must either manage the situation or be overtaken by it. Charles neither endorsed the course nor instructed William to desist. When Camilla's office later supplied a partial disclosure, William's team rejected it as incomplete. The formal rejection by the future king's office of a submission from the Queen Consort's office lacks modern precedent. A further detail then emerged. One of the yacht guests had held an unlogged meeting in London with a member of Camilla's patronage advisory board 6 weeks before the July voyage. The first outward sign of altered arrangements appeared on September 12, 2025, when Charles arrived alone at a London film premiere. Camilla had been listed on the original program. The official explanation cited a scheduling conflict. Inside the palace, the absence registered as the initial visible fracture. Charles has undergone cancer treatment since February 2024. The practical consequences of that treatment have included reduced engagements, limited overseas travel, and days on which he is unable to participate fully. Responsibility for chairing discussions and reviewing documents has therefore passed with increasing frequency to William. By the time the yacht episode became known, Charles's capacity to intervene decisively on Camilla's behalf was already constrained by the physical and institutional realities of his illness. Charles's subsequent conversation with William was difficult. Their relationship had been carefully restored over many years. His commitment to Camilla is long-standing and genuine. When William insisted that the partial disclosure remained inadequate, Charles sought additional time. William granted 72 hours. During that interval, the unlogged meeting was put directly to Camilla, who stated that she had neither attended nor known of it. The answer, even if accurate, created further difficulty. Either her staff had arranged contact with a future host without her knowledge, or the meeting was judged insufficiently significant to report. Neither possibility strengthened her position. At the conclusion of the period, Charles authorized the review to proceed, requesting only that Camilla be treated with dignity and that nothing enter the public domain without his prior knowledge. William accepted the latter conditions. The review was already underway. The practical consequence was clear to every senior official. The protective space Charles had once been able to maintain around Camilla had narrowed beyond repair. Removal within the royal household does not announce itself through formal statements. Camilla's autumn program, prepared in July, had listed 14 solo engagements between October and December. By the end of September, 6 of those engagements had been reassigned to other members of the family. Organizations were informed of scheduling pressures. No further explanation was offered. The process continued through the diary itself. Briefing documents ceased to arrive. Meetings proceeded without her presence. Access to information, events, and decision-makers constitutes the practical currency of influence. When that access contracts, influence contracts with it. In early October, 2 senior members of Camilla's staff, her deputy private secretary and a senior communications advisor, were informed that their roles were being restructured. Both accepted alternative posts within the wider household. Neither was replaced. By the end of October, 3 junior staff had also been redeployed. The dedicated team, 11 strong, strong at the beginning of 2025, numbered 7 by November. Distribution of private briefings was simultaneously reduced. Foreign policy and certain institutional papers no longer reached her desk. She moved from routine inclusion to a strict need-to-know basis. Catherine, Princess of Wales, assumed several of the reassigned engagements, including the Edinburgh Women's Leadership Conference and 2 charity dinners. Her office confirmed attendance within a week of the changes, indicating that her team had been aware of the openings before Camilla's household had fully processed them. The transition appeared seamless to external observers. In late October, William and Catherine spent a weekend with Charles at Highgrove. Camilla remained at Clarence House. The arrangement was described as informal, yet its composition was carefully noted within the household. Camilla retains her title and continues to appear beside Charles on state occasions. The substance of her role, however, has altered. The diary is thinner, the staff reduced, the flow of information restricted, and the public spaces she once occupied are now filled by Catherine. In November 2025, William addressed a closed gathering of senior civil servants engaged in public sector reform. No transcript was released. 2 participants later described the content to journalists. William stated that institutions which protect individuals at the expense of their own integrity do not endure. He named no one. Those present required no further clarification. The remark aligns with the approach he has already applied to the Duchy of Cornwall, which he has administered since September 2022. The estate generates approximately £30 million annually and comprises extensive land holdings. Under his direction, external contractors have been replaced, management restructured, and arrangements previously based on personal trust converted to written agreements. The same discipline is visible in the governance of the Royal Foundation: clear accounts, measurable objectives, and the termination of programs that fail to deliver. William's insistence on documentation is not an abstract preference. It is the product of observation across decades. At the age of 15, he walked behind his mother's coffin. The informal understandings and unrecorded arrangements that characterized the institution in that period left lasting consequences. When he encounters undeclared hospitality, unlogged meetings, or undocumented financial relationships, he recognizes a pattern he has long sought to eliminate. The Yacht episode supplied both justification and momentum for an agenda he had already articulated: fewer working members of the family, tighter control over external associations, and zero tolerance for relationships that create even the appearance of conflict. The reduction in the public face of the monarchy, already visible in the exclusion of Prince Andrew and the Duke of Sussex, and the progressive withdrawal of more distant relatives, continues. The core group is now essentially William, Catherine, Charles, and the Princess Royal. Catherine's return to full duties in early 2025 after her own medical treatment coincided with a substantial increase in her responsibilities. Her office now participates in strategic coordination previously reserved for more senior figures. One source described her as a co-strategist rather than a supporting spouse. William places particular reliance on her judgment. Against that background, Camilla's reduced program is not a temporary sanction. It reflects a structural reorientation of the institution. The engagements transferred to Catherine are not scheduled to return. The staff reductions show no sign of reversal. When Charles is no longer on the throne, Camilla will hold the title of Queen Dowager and retain a residence. The principal estates will pass to William. The institutional support she currently receives exists because Charles is king. After that transition, her position will depend substantially on decisions taken by William. Everything Camilla possesses within the institution, title, staff, residences, and standing has rested on one foundation: Charles's presence on the throne and his willingness to exercise authority on her behalf. That arrangement functioned for many years. The Yacht episode demonstrated its limits. A monarch managing active medical treatment and conserving energy for essential duties is not positioned to conduct a prolonged internal contest against an heir who holds the documentary record and the practical levers of day-to-day administration. William required neither public confrontation nor personal animosity. He waited until the protective capacity had thinned and then advanced through the resulting space. The process has been clinical rather than theatrical. Camilla's long rehabilitation from the most publicly resented figure of her generation to an accepted queen consort required decades of discipline. That hard-won position is now contracting, not through a single decisive blow, but through the cumulative effect of successive small withdrawals of access and responsibility. The decisive test is no longer the autumn diary or the staffing changes. Those are already settled. The remaining question is whether Camilla will accept the narrow narrower role now assigned to her, or will attempt to recover lost ground. Any sustained effort to reverse the reductions would compel Charles to choose openly between his wife and the institutional direction pursued by his heir. William has almost certainly calculated the sequence of such a confrontation. He does not initiate moves without having mapped the subsequent stages. Camilla still holds her formal title and continues to appear at state occasions. The practical reality is a thinner diary, a smaller staff, and the progressive occupation of her former public spaces by Catherine. 3 questions remain unanswered inside the palace. Did Camilla fully appreciate the risk of proceeding with the voyage after the revised rules had been placed in her own office? Is William's insistence on absolute control the necessary corrective, or does it risk constructing an institution intolerant of ordinary human misjudgment? And when Charles is no longer present, will William extend to Camilla the measure of support she will then require from a man who has never forgotten the events of his adolescence? Those questions will determine the next phase of this still unfolding realignment.